باسم المفوضية السامية للأمم المتحدة لشؤون اللاجئين أرحب بكم في مبنى الشيخ صباح الأحمد لجابر الصباح قائد العمل الإنساني في دولة الكويت. نجتمع اليوم لنناقش ونبحث مع نخبة من رواد القطاع الخاص الدور الحيوي الذي يمكن أن يلعبه هذا القطاع من شركات وأفراد في دولة الكويت في الاستجابة الإنسانية لأزمة اللاجئين.
I'm Afsin Yurdakul. I'm a news anchor in Turkey. And it's such a great pleasure to be here. First of all, I have to say it's my first time in Kuwait, so I'm very excited. And thank you, Omar, to Alghanim Industries, and to the United Nations for having me here for this cause that I care deeply about as a citizen, as a person, and as a journalist too. I have been covering this issue ever since the early stages, being a journalist in Turkey. And as we know very well, that Turkey has been doing a lot to be a part of the solution. We share the longest border with Syria. It's more than 900 kilometers. So that means we're directly affected by it. But that being said, we also know very well that this is a problem that our generation and our region is faced with. It's not just Turkey's efforts or Kuwait's efforts or Europe's efforts. It needs a collective effort and collective creative thinking in terms of how we can come up with solutions, because we know that we will be living with this for decades to come.
A year ago, the UNHCR asked me to be on their advisory board for the region, which I was honored, and getting more involved with the UNHCR helped me to realize it's such a multifaceted issue. And in order to address such a multifaceted issue, you need a multifaceted organization in order to be able to address it. And so while I was frustrated with all of our efforts in the past because of the lack of traction, and I'm an action-oriented guy, when I get involved in something, I want to see the difference that I'm making. And the example that His Highness the Emir has set, with Kuwait being the largest donor to the Syrian refugee crisis, which Dr. Hanan had mentioned, I think really set an example for us as a private sector to be able to engage. And I think we as a private sector too long took the back seat to the government and said, well, the government's doing this, and we just watch them do it. But really, we have a responsibility as a private sector to go forward to do this.
I think our strategy is a grassroots one, where we also go out to our network and we encourage them in their own local communities to have a response to the crisis. And they have their own relief organizations, they have their own initiatives, and we seek to match those. We seek to sort of, whether it's by delivering goods and products to groups in Greece that are bringing in blankets for the winter. We encourage really a bottom-up approach as well, and it's because we feel it's important for our own people to be engaged.
UNHCR started around 10 years ago, but let's say 5 years ago took it very seriously to start diversifying our income and try to grow the part of the pie where we're getting funds from the private sector. And when we say private sector, it doesn't mean only businesses, and our friend here knows very well that the businesses and the private sector as a business is only the platform, because when it comes to engagement, when it comes to advocacy, we want to work with the private sector to send the message out.
My role is being on the UNHCR board and advise UNHCR as to what strategy we should be developing. When talking about education, I heard a lot about setting up infrastructure. You know, education in this part of the world, the KPIs tend to be around how many desks you have, buildings, computers, things like that. And when I was interacting with my colleagues, I was saying, guys, let's stop talking about hardware, let's talk about software. And let's take a look at who have been the most successful, who are the best educated Arabs in the region. And the most educated Arabs in the region are the Palestinian refugees in the Lebanon refugee camps. And they're educated in tents for the past 20 years. And if you look at the standardized 6th and 7th grade results, and you look at all the Arab countries, they're the highest. And they don't have any buildings. And in the Gulf, we have all these huge concrete buildings with air conditioned, everybody has a computer and everything, but we're in the bottom quartile, they're in the top quartile. The difference is the teachers. Teachers are engaged, who are passionate about making a difference in these young persons' lives.
By providing airplanes and warehouses and trucking and boots on the ground all over the world, free of charge to the humanitarian community, we can actually make a big difference.
Of the people who are in refugee camps, let's make sure we get them really passionate teachers, passionate educators. And here's the good news. There's a lot of really passionate educators out there who feel strongly about this issue, and use UNHCR as a vehicle to be able to get these passionate educators to these young people. And hey, if you affect 10% of the refugees out there and give them a really good education, when Syria comes back, if you have 10% of the education coming back as critical thinkers who go out there, be young entrepreneurs who can get that country back and started again, then we've really made a difference.
On one hand, we have the private sector willing to be involved. They have the expertise, they have the systems, the efficiency, the networks, and they're willing. And on the other hand, we have the United Nations and UNHCR, represented here by Houssam, and they are in the field reaching out to millions of people in need, and not just taking care of their immediate needs, but also working on a future plan.
We're a 150-year-old family business. I'm fourth generation. And we're spending some time being introspective and saying, you know, what's the fact that we've been able to be successful for this period of time? Statistically, the fourth generation has like a 2% chance of surviving. The third generation has a 7% chance of surviving. So why is it that we've been able to beat the odds? And we said it's two basic pillars. One is business excellence, developing value propositions that resonate with consumers over time. And as times change, that changes from whether it's trading ships with India, to selling cars, to financing, and that changes. And the second key pillar was over all those years, each generation, was giving back to our communities. And that's been a key pillar to every generation of my family. From my great-grandfather to my grandfather to my father to myself, and that's core to who we are. And
also creates opportunities for others to be involved in that process. Maybe as a supply chain company, we can help in one part, but I'm sure there are people that are good at sort of online education. They could maybe have technology where you can actually educate refugees more effectively in a sort of difficult environment. These are the sorts of ideas that that we're engaging now with the World Economic Forum Humanitarian Cluster. They're looking at certain technologies that could be used over a longer life cycle of a crisis. So
there was an extensive survey that was done on all of the Syrian refugees that left Syria by a professor from Harvard, and they asked all sorts of questions, and there's this misconception, I think, amongst Westerners that all Syrians want to go to Europe, that all Syrians want to go to the US. And actually, over 90% of the Syrians that we're surveying want to go back to their hometown. So this is not a 90% all the Syrians who want to go invade Europe, who want to go invade the West. They want to go home, and so they're looking for an end to this crisis.